Hi, I'm Preetish, and I'm going to show you the solutions of the problem that we have given you for this assignment. So this assignment had 18 questions. So I plan to talk about their solutions one by one, but at the same time, I won't be able to go in very much detail. So what we plan to do is that after this tutorial, we plan to make this notebook public. So in case, suppose you are attending this and maybe after tomorrow or sometime later, you can, if you forget or if you are having some other kind of difficulty, you can always refer to this notebook, try to play with solution and maybe come up with your own solutions as well. Because often programming depends on style, and your style of problem solving may be different from mine. So all those things can be incorporated if you already have this. Okay, so we'll start right away. So the first question was, so we have to generate in random integers, and the number of integers that we want to generate should be taken from the keyboard, right? So the hint for this question was that you need to use a random module for this. So the function that we are looking for to generate this is called random integer, randint. And so it takes two arguments, a start number and the end number. So for example, if we want to generate a random number, for example, between from 1 to 100, you just run this code and you will get a number. So for example, I'm trying to run, oh wait, it's not happening. Yeah, so now it has run and you have a number which is 89, right? So now we're into next cell. So what we need to do now is that we have to repeat this process for n number of time, and n is of course is taken from the user. So if I run this cell, it is asking me specify the number of random integers I want to generate. So for example, I give it, let's say 3, right? And so the thing to note is whenever you use this input function to give Python anything, so usually whatever you give is in string, right? So just keep in mind. So whenever you are giving n, this is at this point it is string, right? But now suppose if you want to generate 3 random integers, so you have to repeat this process thrice, right? And for that, the most easiest way is to do the for loop, right? So you just write this for I in range from 0 to n. So just take 0, 1, 2, 3, sorry, 0, 1, and 2, and it will just create a random integer. But before that, you just need to convert this n into an integer, right? Because otherwise you cannot use this inside this range function. So when you run this cell, you get 3 integers. So that's the solution, very easy problem. The first one is done. Similarly, the second one is also very easy. So in the second one, we have asked you to actually provide a number from the input, the keyboard input, and you will check whether that number is there in the list or not. And the hint which was given in this problem was that try to play with this in keyword, right? So for example, the hint was that if you try typing a in jack, let's see what happens. So we'll try to do that. So when we type a in jack, it returns true. And why is that? Because actually this in keyword, it searches whether this element is inside this or not, this other object. So now this is one example, but this can also be used to check things if they're inside a list or not. So for example, I have just made a list of numbers 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to try and check whether 1 is there or not. So beforehand, we know that it is there, so it should return true. It's true. On the other hand, if you take some number which is not there, for example, 5, notice what it does, it returns false. Okay. So using this, we can solve this very easy. So first we define this list as our list, let's say my list. And then I'm asking user to take a number, right, from the input. So if it's there, then using if sentence, I can if sentence and the in keyword that we have just learned, we can find it whether it is there. So if it is true, then it will print yes, found it. Otherwise, it will print sorry, could not find that. So we'll try this again. So let's say we try to. So yes, it is there, and so it says that we have found it. On the other hand, again, if you just put a, let's say 10, which is not there in the list, it says sorry, could not find it. Right. So at this level, we are just brushing up our skills. We are just trying to going through the various small things that we have learned. Okay. So the question 3 is similar in spirit, but now it is kind of brushing up your skills about the concepts about the dictionaries. So here, what they have asked you is that you should input the names and marks of 5 students, right? And so I have adopted the following strategy to make this work. So what I'm doing is that first I am creating a list which is empty, right? So an empty list can always be appended by adding an element, right? So if you list, let's say if you do names dot append some number, it will just take it, right? And so this feature can be used to take input from the keyboard, right? And this can be repeated, let's say 5 times, because we have like 5 students, and so you can can in the input 5 names, and similarly one can do it for marks. So the thing that we need to remember is that we need to put them in order. So if student 1 has got, let's say 50 marks, then the in the first element of names you will input student 1, and the marks also you should give, let's say 50, right? So we'll see this in action now, right? So let's put some generic names. I don't know, let's say person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4, person 5. And for their marks, we can also put anything you want. 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. Okay, so now it has done. So what we have done wrong, that we have just created 2 lists with names and the marks, right? So the second thing that we need to do is that somehow we need to combine them and to make the dictionary. Now the easiest way to do is, of course, you can do this, you can write this by hand, right? And can create it. But there's a more smarter way to do it. So for that, we use a function which is called zip, right? So what this zip does actually, if you give it 2 lists, then it creates the pairs, right? It just maps the similar index of one list to the similar index of the second list. So for example, whatever list we have created, if we zip it, right? And then if we make a list out of that, zipped list, then what happens is that you get something like this. So person 140, person 50, etc., etc. So using zip, you can create list. Similarly, using zip, you can also create a dictionary. And to do that, we just use this dict braces function. So inside this, we just put 2 lists and zip it, and then it should give us the answer. Yeah, so this is what we got. This is what we wanted. Okay. So again, very easy. Okay. Now, 4th one is prime number checker. So they're asking to, to accept a number from the user, and you have to check whether the number is prime or not, right? So it should return true if prime, or else it should return false. Okay. So what I'll do is that maybe I'll tell you how to So first thing, of course, to do is that you enter a number. And let us start with a number which is prime, which we know for sure. Let's say 13. 13 is a prime number, no problem. Now, in order to write this function, I need to check whether this number is prime or not. So for that, I'll develop an algorithm first, right? So in order to do that, I'll just do a kind of test kind of run whether this algorithm works or not. Okay. So what I do is that first I define an initial flag and set it to true. Okay. And as a next step, what I'll do is that, so if I'm taking 13, I will divide this number by all the numbers which are greater than 1 and less than 13. That is, I'll divide this number by all the numbers from 2 to 12. And if this number is divisible, that means if the remainder is somehow 0, right, then this number cannot be prime because it can be divided by a number which is greater than 1 and less than this number. So then in that case, I'll set this flag as false. Okay, and maybe I can also print, which was the first number it got divided by. And the moment I know that it got divided by a number, I come out of that loop. So I use break because we don't need to further explore it. We already have the answer whether this guy is prime or not. Okay. And so if it's not divisible, it will just go on till 12 and it will exit normally. And the flag will remain whatever it was. Okay. So given this number that we have, 13, if I run this, gives, okay, it is a true. Why? Because it's a prime number. We can change the number, for example, let's say 14, we know it's not prime. Okay, so now if I run it here, again, see, the number is divisible by 2, so it's false, right? So now this algorithm is working. So we just put this algorithm inside the function definition. The only thing which will change is that instead of n, I will use a variable which is inside the function. So this should be the input variable of the function, and it will return something. The question has asked to return only the flag. You just tell me whether it's true or false. So I'll just return this flag as defined. So now this function has been defined, and so I'll compile it. It's done, and let's see whether it works or not. So check prime 13. It is true because this is prime. So let's ask another question. Whether let's put some non-prime number. Let's say 24. False because it is divided by various other numbers, right? Okay. So this has been done. Now I'll jump directly to 8 and return to other questions later, because this question actually wants us to use this function that we have defined. So this has two parts. So the first part is asking us to print all the even numbers from 0 to 100. And the second part is also print all prime numbers between this range. Okay. So the definition of odd and even, I think everybody knows. So if a number is divisible by 2, right? And if I divide the number by 2, and if the remainder is 0, then it's a even number. So what you need to do, again, you run a for loop. So this for loop for number in range from 0 to 101 picks all number from 0 to 100, and each number is then for each number I'm trying to get a remainder if I divide it by 2, and if the remainder is 0, then it's even, and so I'll print the number. So if I do that, I'll get everything like that, right? So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. All of them are defined to be even numbers. So similarly for odd, it's very easy to do. Instead of 0, you put 1 because the remainder will always be 1 if it's an odd number. So then turn it and you get all the odd numbers. Very simple. Now, in order to check for primes, you can use the previously defined functions we have. The only thing extra that I'm changing is that like I'm changing the range because 1 is not defined as prime, so it's like greater than 1, right? So what this does is that check prime always will return a true or false, right? So suppose number I is a prime, then this condition will become true, and only then following sentences will be executed. So then you will get that number printed. Otherwise, it won't happen. So this is as simple. So then from 1 to 100, 0 to 100, sorry. So you have all these numbers which are prime. Right. So now we return back to like earlier questions, which is 5. So in number 5, it has been asked like write a program which accept a name from the user and prints the same name with all letter capitalized. Okay. And when you do that, after that, you need to find the correct string method, which will save you a lot of labor and which can be done in one line. So we'll do that. So in order to do that, let's start with a name. So I'm asking the user to give me a name. So we'll give that now. Let's say I'm putting, no problem. This is a name. And what we want is that we want to make all the letters capital, right? So to do this, first I define a kind of empty string, which will be used later, as you will see in a moment, right? And the strings are like you can iterate over them. For example, if you run for loop on a string, one by one you can pick letters. For example, you can pick H, A, R, B, E, R, etc., right? And so each letter you pick, you can also capitalize, right? So in general, this capitalize function, what it does that if you give it some, let's say a word, so it capitalize only the first letter of that word. But here in our case, we are just picking one letter at a time. So like our string length is 1. So it will capitalize that letter. Okay. And since you know that strings can be added, so one can add the string. So example, first it picks H, it capitalizes, so it's already capital, nothing happens. It goes as H here after addition. Second, it goes to A, it makes it capital and then adds it here. So you then get H, A, etc., etc. So at the end of this loop, this blank initial string will now become the string that we want, that is this name with all the letters which are used should be capital, right? So I'm just running this, and so you can just see, so each letter gets capitalized first, and then we are adding it, and so the first output that you see is done by the loop. Now this can be done very easily using a method called upper. So if you just take the string and after say dot upper braces, this just does the work of whatever you have written. You don't have to think that much. Makes life easy, right? So more on wordplay, I think the second thing, this is fun. So we are trying to check if a given word is palindrome or not, right? So palindrome are defined as a word that look the same if you write them in backwards. For example, radar. Radar is a palindrome. So if you just write it in reverse way, it will stay the same. It won't change, right? So we have been asked to define a function which checks whether a given word is palindrome or not. So this is what we have to do, right? So there are two fundamentals that you need to remember in order to solve this problem. So the first thing is that strings can be compared, right? So if you have a string one, let's say I'm calling it AB, and also you have string 2, which is calling it AB, and actually they're pointing to the same objects, actually, this one and string 1 and 2. So if I compare, if string 1 is equal to string 2 or not, and if it's same string, then this will print same string. Otherwise, it will print different strings. So as a demonstration, since these are same, you can compare and you'll find that these are like same strings. But suppose I change it slightly. it won't happen. So it's different string, right? So strings can be compared. So the second thing is that strings can be written backwards as well. And this has been covered in the lectures when Yogesh was teaching the slicing in Python. So if you have a string, let's say, call it Python, and if you want to write it backwards, what you just need to do is that in order to read this reverse way, just type colon in braces and then -1. So it just reads backwards, right? So NOHTYP, right? So when these two are there, and then it's very easy to construct this function. So this function then will take a string and it will just compare whether the initial string, and if I write it reverse, if they are like equal or not, right? So if they are equal, it will return true, or else it will return false, right? So now I'm just running it. So this has been compiled, and just check it. So I'm in this function, I'm giving two strings, Python, which is certainly not a palindrome, and radar, which is a palindrome. So the first one, it is saying false, and the second verse, it's saying it's true. Yes, it is palindrome. So all good. This works. Seventh again is like you have to play with strings. So what you need to do is you need to write one once in first line, and in the second line you have to write 2 twice and 3 thrice in the third line, and so on, etc. Right. So this again is like for brushing up your basics. A number can be converted into strings using this function str braces. And so suppose if you want to write three times, what you need to do first, you need to convert it into strings, and then strings can be multiplied. So if you want to multiply this by 3, then it will write 3 times, right? So once you have this knowledge, it's very easy to do again. You can kind of pick all the numbers from 1 to 5, and like using range, you can iterate over them. And so for example, for I in range 1 to 6, we'll pick all these numbers and convert them into strings, and then multiply them at the, so 1 will be multiplied by 1, so only 1 will remain. 2 will be multiplied twice, so these things proceeds like that, and then you get this kind of structure which we wanted. It has been done. It was even and odd, we just did. Okay, so now here, so what this says that write a program to accept numbers through the keyboard and return the mean, median, and standard deviation of those numbers. So these can be computed using statistics module in the Python standard library. There should be no limit on how many numbers the user can provide. Users should be able to quit whenever they want. So the idea is that if you have this module statistics, they provide this mean, median, and standard deviation function. So if you have an array of number, you can always apply this function, and they will give you mean, median, and standard deviation. No problem with that. So the kind of challenge, or maybe a little trick that you need to overcome, little difficulty that you need to overcome in this program, is just this thing that users should be able to quit whenever they want, right? So, and this can be tackled with the if condition. So first, you just define a list which is empty, okay? And maybe then a condition which is initialized to be true. And so what you do is that you put things in a while loop. So while this condition is true, from this line, you will always keep taking input from the user, okay? But if the user wants to exit, they can type exit, right? And if the input becomes exit, then this condition is set to be false. I'm demanding that, right? And when this becomes false here, which means this also becomes false here, and the while loop will start and will come out of the loop. Okay. And by the time you have not like typed exit and the loop is still running, the list will keep on getting appended with the numbers that you have typed. Okay. And they will get stored in this list L, and you can like have them, you can print them, and once this list is ready, you can apply these modules and get the values of mean, median, and standard deviation that we want. So let us try. Okay, so let's say writing 10, 20, maybe 30, and then 40. And maybe after that I said, that's okay, I don't want any more. So I just put exit, right? And so it gives you mean, median, standard deviation. You can just go on with any number you want. So let me try to provide one more example. Let's say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. That's it. Exit. Again, the mean, median, and standard deviation is there. Okay. Now the same thing is, similar thing has been asked in the other program, but instead of what this says that in this program, sorry, in this problem you don't have to provide the numbers by a user. You can take a list, which can be arbitrarily long though. Okay, and you try to compute the mean, median, standard deviation, but not using this module. So the rationale behind giving you this question is that, like, you maybe you can appreciate that how much labor you save that if you already exist some kind of module. So what you will be doing is that you will be writing your own module, and using your own module, you will perform the same thing which has been done here. Okay. So let us start with the test list, which is just given here, right? So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to sort them into ascending order. Right? Why? Because remember, like when we want to compute median, median is defined as a number which is at the exactly middle of the distribution. It has equal number of numbers which are greater and equal number of numbers which are less than it, right? So it can be in the middle, right? So so if I take this list and sort it, it will just give me a sorted list. Sorry, this list is not defined yet. So okay, this is there. I've defined the list, and now when I run it, it gives me a sorted list, right? And you can also compute the number of element that it has, as in like how many numbers do you have in that list. So for that, you can take this length of this list, and it gives 4. Okay. Okay. So in this section, I'll just maybe quickly go through how I'm computing mean, median, and standard deviation. Although it's very easy, I'm like mean is just total by n, and the standard deviation has this standard formula which you can find anywhere. So maybe I'm not going into much detail. I'll just quickly go through, just tell you what I have done here. So the only thing I use at some point, that in standard deviation, you have to take square root of some value. So I have imported a math module, which I did, and I'm writing this, I'm computing the square root. And so to begin with, for like, if you want to compute the median, you just need to find a number which is center, right? So if this length of the number, right, is odd, then it's not a problem. So suppose it has like 5 elements, then the central element will be as in like 1, 2, 3, right? So third element will be median, no problem of this sorted list. But if the length is even, what you need to do is that you just need to sum the central 2 elements and divide. So the average of central 2 elements will be median. So that has been done. So only thing that you need to remember is that in Python, the counting starts from 0. So even I'm saying that, for this will be between second and the third, it's actually 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So if you read this notebook at some later time, just keep that in mind, that when you try to get something as index, the indices starts from 0, although in our common sense the counting starts from 1 to n, right? So that translation that you need to make in your head in order to interact with the Python. So okay, so this chunk actually will split the things that we want. So this has been written, and since I'm trying to write a module, it is always advised to check whether your algorithm is working or not. So this has been done here. So when you give it, right, so you have this mean, median, median, mean, and standard deviation value, which are here. It's bit. So once you do it, what can you do is that using this, you can define the functions, which are, let's say, here. Maybe open a terminal. And I think it is, let's start the pi. Sorry. So it's called my module. Okay. So using that algorithm, you have just defined, some functions. So the first function is median, which takes an array. Second function is mean, which again takes an array. And the third function is standard deviation, which takes two numbers, because you also need to know the mean. And of course, you need to provide the array. So once this is done, and if you have written this, you just save it with an extension named pi. So it's mymodule.py. So that tells the computer that this is a Python script. And then when you do that, just need to compile this once. So I'm doing, let's say I'm just running. So now this executes without any problem. So once this has been done, all the functions which have written inside can be accessed. So we can import that script as a module. So we can just say import my module, right? And then just like we had done it in this program, statistics dot mean. Now I can do the same thing. My module dot mean, my module dot median, my module dot standard deviation. Okay. The array that I'm providing is the same as this problem, the problem 9. So that I can compare the value. So it's 45, 45, 24 point, let's say 49. And then it should give me the same number. If I run it, 45, 45, 24.49. Okay, so it's working. So that's how you write module. So one thing more to say that, so I have asked you not to use any kind of module, but of course I've used math. And in the math, I've used the square root, right? So again, it's saving me some of my work. But suppose if I had to write this square root, how to compute the square root of numbers, it'll be again a big chunk of code. And so you can understand how much actually labor you save when you have all these modules already available in Python. So this is one of the very nice feature of this language that I like. Okay. So question 11 is again on the strings, right? And this is easy, very easy actually. So it is saying that provide a string, and this program should check whether in that string certain elements are there or not. So that list has been given, right? So what I do is that I create all those list containing all those special elements, okay? And then I ask the user give an input string, okay? Then what you need to do is that, just like in that question regarding the name, we had iterated over each element of string. We will do the same, and we will use our old friend, the in keyword, to see whether the each letter in our input string is contained in this or not, right? So using this, you can just create this. I hope this is like understandable. So let's try to give a string which contains some of them. This singles. So for example, Preetish, maybe I'll give a space, maybe I'll give a dollar, let's say 1, 2, 3, maybe some power, an ampersand, and maybe a comma, right? So then what it does, it goes, picks each letter, try to see whether that letter is there or not. If it's there, it just prints which are the things, otherwise it just does not do anything. So you can see it has correctly identified the dollar. the comma, the power, the ampersand, and the space. This works. Okay, so again, question 12 is again on the string, right? So here you have been asked to get a sentence from the user, and the program should be able to split it into words and print one word online. So again, it's very easy, and for convenience, I defined a function, right? So this function, let's say I'm calling a split print, it takes a argument as a sentence, right? So for example, I'm saying that this sentence is I love Python, right? So it takes it. So what it does is that it splits this sentence into a number of words. And how can you do that? You can use this function called split, where you need to provide a delimiter. Now, so this delimiter is space here. So notice that actually this is a big string, but elements are actually kind of separated by a space, right? So when you like split it, it actually creates a list in this format. So it will be I, comma, love, comma, Python, right? And again, you can iterate over the list and print each element. So this is what it does. So this is function. Right now, no input will come, but I have defined it. Okay. And then I can take a sentence from the user, provide this to the this function, and I should be able to get the desired output. So let's say I write the same thing. I love Python. Right. So now it has split it into words. Of course, we can do it in arbitrary long sentence. Suppose what if I like provide this code, so this whole sentence itself. So let's say, right. So it has split it. Read a sentence from the user and split it into words and print one word on a line. Done, no problem. Okay, so at this point, maybe I would like to stop because next questions are about playing around with the text file. And so other things were very basic, etc. If somebody wants to ask a question, they can. So this like assignment is pretty basic. I think everybody should have been able to do and follow me this. Of course, like maybe for some things you may have done it a bit differently, but yeah, you can always do that. There's no one correct method to do any problem. That's what I think. Okay, so now we are going into this text file.
Preetish?
Yeah.
Sorry, my audio wasn't working. Am I audible now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, but the question was about the module statistics.
Yes.
The thing is that I checked statistics is more inbuilt into Python and it's away from the third-party modules like NumPy. But my question is, even with NumPy, we can do all the graphical work that statistics can intrinsically do. So what's the difference between, or rather I should ask, what's the advantage of using statistics over NumPy?
There is no advantage. The only thing I've, so I did statistics because as you said, it's more closer to Python rather than third-party modules. So when I had made this assignment, that time NumPy was not introduced. So I thought since we are using, let's say, math module in the lectures, in the same spirit, one can use statistics. It's simpler just because of that. Otherwise, if you want to do large data crunching, which you will be doing in the second assignment, which will be considerably difficult and you'll be analyzing astronomical data, you cannot live without NumPy. So we'll do that there. NumPy is definitely more powerful. This was done just because at that time, NumPy was not introduced in the lectures when this assignment was made.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may add something here, which is that the functionality is not identical. statistics has some amount of functionality. It has all the basic stuff, median, variance, standard deviation, etc. But if you want more advanced statistical functionality, then NumPy provides it, and beyond that, SciPy.stats provides even more functionality.
Yes, yes, stats is really powerful. All right, thank you, Yogesh.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, if not, then I'll move on. Fine, so we have come into this problem 13. So what it's there is that you have been given a text file, simple.txt. So you have like asked to read the lines from the given text, line by line in a loop, and print it. And so this simple.txt file, which actually I should be able to open it. Right, so open it here. So this looks like this. It has some numbers and some words. So we just want to print this, read and print. And we also want to know that which line contains number. Again, a very simple exercise, right? So in order to do that, we first read that file using open and read all the lines using .readline function. And when you do that, after that reading this, you just close it, the file, so that no further modification can be made with this original files. And then you can work on this read lines which are stored in lines, right? So if I do that, then what happens, right? So then everything has been contained as a list here, right? So only thing then I need to do, since all these are lists, is that I need to iterate over the list and pick each element and print it. That's the problem. It's nothing like big, it's like very easy. So let's see. So when I do that, I find everything. It's here. Okay, no problem. Right. So now what is there to be done is that we also need to check which of the lines they contain numbers, and for the words we don't want to do anything, right? So again, that can be done using the for loop. So now what I had done is that I have picked each element in that on the list. But now what you can do is that you can use enumerate. So what it does, of course, for let's say I and rows. So I will like point to the index, and rows will point to the, these values, this 1 or 2 or 7 or 11, right? So for you need to do is that do that. Now we want to check whether the element that we are picking, whether it is a number or not. So for that, what we can do, we can try to convert that, element, which is now at a string state, into a float, or you can also use integer. There's no problem, right? So for example, float is a function which tries to interpret, a string if it's a number. So if you just give it a string, which is, let's say, string within the quotes 1. So this is string, but actually, if you pass it to the float, it will try to interpret whether this is a number or not, right? And it will convert and it will give it a number. Okay. But if you try to do float under quotes 1, now this is a string. So this cannot convert this. It cannot interpret this as some kind of number. And so it will return a value error. And so we want to exploit this fact. So what we will do that wherever, so you need to try to interpret the elements as a number. So if you can do that, just print that line and the particular index, which will point to which line it is, and it contains what numbers and the interpreted number, except when it cannot. So if it cannot, what you need to do is that you forget about that loop, that iteration, and go to the next one. So then you just put continue there. So this will do the work, right? So when you run this, then you get it. Line 0 contains a number, line 2 contains a number, line 4 contains a number, and what are those numbers. Right? That's how you get it. So this was kind of example where you try to see if there are some errors using this and can you use them and do this kind of coding. Okay. So now other thing is that as the next question, now you have given a file something called multi-column text, right? So this is a file which contains a big text, and so maybe I should be to show you what is it. Let's see this, right? So then this is the Zen of Python, which has been written here. So I have given this. So this multi-column text file contains all the big text. So what you need to do with it? Sorry. So what you need to do is that you need to read line by line from this file and then split them into a list. Okay. And then you need to print the first word and the total number of words of each line, right? And then write the output onto the text file. Okay, so this is sounds big, but again, it's very easy. So what you need to do first, you need to open that file, okay, and read the lines. And as usual, always close the the source file that you had in your hand, so that no modification can be made. So once you do that, and if this, let's try to see when you apply this read line, what happens, what it gives you, you know. So if you read the lines and try to print it, so it just contains a list, but now in the list you have like big long integer. Okay, so now what you need to do first, you need to separate, rather split this big string into a number of sentences. So how will you do that? So in English, usually sentences are ended with a full stop, and after a space, the second sentence starts, right? So in this case, the delimiter will be a full stop, and after that space. And so if you do that, it will create a list of sentences. Let's try to run it. Right, so now you see every sentence is separate. Beautiful is better than ugly, etc., etc. Right. So now, once you have done it, now again, for each sentence, you need to split them into words, and for each word, you need to, get the for each sentence, you also need to know what is the length of the word that you have, right? So now what we'll do, we'll iterate over this sentences list and pick each sentence. We'll try to get the first word and then total number of words. So again, so the first word will always be when you split this sentence using the delimiter space. The first will be the 0th index, and the total number of word will nothing but length of this let's say splitted word list, right? So when you do that, you can print it, right? But you are also required to put this whole thing into an output file. So for that, beforehand, you need to open an output file, and when you find these words, you just need to write it in this output file. So your out file.write, whatever you're printing, you can write it, no problem. So if you run this code, it will come like this. So this is the output which is there, right? And if you open this output.txt file, it should also give you that thing. So maybe rather than going there, maybe I'm showing it here, right? So if you can see, it has given the same thing. So it gives the first word and the number of words in each sentence. Very easy, done. Okay, so now we have done like working with normal text file, but text file can also contain table in some way. And so next 2 or 3 questions are about the table manipulation. So 15 actually has different subparts. So I'll go to that like one by one. So the first task is that you are given a table.txt which contains this columns A and B, and we have certain values assigned to them. Now what you need to do is that you need to find the sum and product for each element and create a column which will denote the addition and the multiplication of this quantities A and B, and then store that into a text file. Okay. So as usual, always open the given problem file or source file that you have, read the lines, and then close it. Okay, so now we'll work with only the lines that we have read. Okay, we also want to write the thing in the output, and so I've also opened output file which I'm calling output_table.txt, and this is in a write mode. Okay, W denotes the write mode. So on the first line, by hand, I'm putting this kind of column headers in some way. So A, B, A plus B, AB, etc. And followed by /n, which actually denotes that it's kind of enter if you try typing in a text file. So it will, whatever comes after that will be the next line. So from here to here. So this has been done because it's convenient, and for the next of the thing that we need to actually do the math, what we'll do is that for this table, we'll only work with rows from, let's say, we'll ignore the 0th row. The first row, second row, third row, and fourth row we'll work on. So what we'll do for rows in lines, which are starting from 1 and going to the end, I'm splitting the list again using a delimiter, right? So this delimiter is now this \n, which is used to split strings separated by enter. So when you do that, you get the elements. So then you get this 1, 2, and the second time you get 3, 4, and third time you get 5, 5, fourth time you get 4, 3. Now the A is okay. In order to get the first element, which is A, you again need to split that elements using a delimiter, which is comma here, and so the 0th will be A and the first will be B, right? So then you actually get access to all these numbers. Now when you get access to all these numbers, what you need to do, convert them into integers, because again at this point of the time you have these elements, they are still strings, so you need to convert them into integers in order to do any math. So then you define, let's say, product, and then there's sum. Okay, and when you do that, write these values in the out file. Okay, so A and B are already strings. While writing, I don't have to convert them, but this product and sum are now have become integers. But while writing, I need to convert them back into integers and put them. So for each lines, I'll put this as 1, right? So then it will give you an output, something which looks like this. So all these things are there, which are elements, and the output I'm showing you. It's called output.table.txt. So I'm not sure if you're able to see, but it creates the table, the required table that we wanted. Okay. So as a second step, we have asked you to print only diagonal numbers. So 1, 4, 10, and 12 in this case, right? So 1, 4, 10, and 12 using the output in the output file that we have just created. And then you need to find the sum. So again, it's very easy. The output table you have created, you read them, read the lines, close it. Now the sum of diagonal element is usually known as trace in a matrix. So I have like initialized dummy value of trace, which is, let's say, 0, right? So again, you will forget about the 0th line because it contains the header. We don't want to do math here. So we'll again iterate over all this. So what we'll do, we will pick first element of line 1, second element of line 2, third element of line 3, and fourth element of line 4. It becomes diagonal. So this is written here. I'm not going over the same loop structure because it's very similar to what I have done here. So if you have understand this, and if you then look at this, it will become very easy. And so what you just need to do is that when you get the diagonal element, you keep on adding, you need to keep on add this into the trace iteratively. So then this has been done. Okay. So once you do that, you can just run it and you pick all this diagonal elements, and the sum is 27. Okay. Similarly, as in final example, we have to create a text file in the same format, which contains everything which is there, but I don't want the row where the product AB is 25 or greater, right? So I just want to retain only those rows where the product AB is less than 25. So again, this is easy. All you need to do is that read the line, no problem, from this output table.txt, right? And again, create an out file where you will store the output. Again, as usual, the first line I'm putting by hand, and then I'm just accessing the rows which kind of contains the number, right? And I just integrate a kind of if conditional in this loop. So only if AB is less than 25, right? I am writing out files. I'm writing the these numbers in the out files. So when you do that, this happens. So this just picks all the rows and ABs and whatnot, what is there. And then this is this have been put in selected output table.txt, which again is here. Again, the fonts may be small, but you know those things are there. So 2, 12, 12 are there, but 25, the row which contained 25 is not there. So that's done. So as again the next part, you just need to find average of all numbers. And then again, what you need to do, you just go there. So now it's slightly different. It just uses for within a for. So it's nested for that we're trying to say. So in this example, what we will do is that we'll pick all the rows first. So the ones containing, let's say, we'll get all the elements for each line. So it's at this stage, it will just give you 1, 2, etc., etc. And then you just need to split, right? So now once you have this 1, 2, 3, whatever.
Preetish, sorry to interrupt, but I just got a message, direct message from somebody that things are going a little bit fast.
Okay.
Your explanation, I think you should slow down a little bit and explain it more line by line, at least only for the last couple of questions.
Okay. So maybe I'll go back up. I think, wait, I think this was okay. And how to say, let's maybe go through this question once more, right? So what you actually need to do is that you just need to create a table. Okay. And like you're using strings and splitting. So if you just want to create this table from this, right, what you need to do is you need to read the lines, right? And we are only interested in working with these numbers, remember? So we need to forget about this. There's no problem. And we'll create an output file where we'll put this thing, the A, AB, the headings by hand. Okay. And all the other things which we need to generate, we have to use the Python commands or computation or algorithms, whatever you say. Okay. So how do you do that? First, if you take this, you can iterate over this, right? Using the for loop, you can take this whole thing and you can split into a list, and each element of the list will contain, let's say, line 1, line, and then line 2 will be this, and the line 3 will be this, and the line 4 will be this. Okay. And if I want to access the first element, so in the line 1, the first element is the 0th element of line 1. So that has been just included here. It's no problem. This is best understood if you actually download this thing, and if you just go by command, try to print what is happening, we'll be able to see. So maybe let's do that. So what we have done here, right now I'm just accessing all the numbers, right? All the rows which contains the number. Okay. And as a second step, what I'm doing is that I'm splitting it up using this delimiter n, right? And if we try to print the elements, let's see what happens. Sorry. Maybe this is okay. I'm a bit okay, wait. Just a minute. So let's see what happens. So if you just print this element, so what it does, this command actually just picks these things, right? So the first is this, second is this, third is this. So if you want to pick, let's say 1, how will you do it, right? So elements, just split this whole line, the first element, using a delimiter comma, right? So if you split, it will create a list which will contain 1 and 2, right? So 0th index will denote the first one, and the index 1 will denote the second one. So that way, in each row, you are accessing the numbers. And once you access the number, you can actually perform the mathematics. Just that you have to convert them into integers first. And once you have done that, you have this a and ab. You just write a line. What is the value of a? What is the value of b? What is the value of a plus b? And what is the value of a into b? So that creates one line in this out file, right? In the second iteration, now the same thing will be performed into this 3, 4, right? And first you will split it. So 0th element will be 3. The first element will be 4. Okay. And then you can perform mathematics and again write a line to the out file, which will contain 3 and 4, which is A and B, and again the product and the sum. So when you do it, it happens. Right. So maybe let's say, so when you run it, then all that thing happens, and then you get this output which you wanted, which I think is called output table.txt. I think, is that clear? Like if you are still doubt, you can maybe unmute yourself and ask. Okay, maybe I'll go ahead then. So now what you need to do, that now we have created a file which contains this, right? So now what this second thing that you have asked is that now just pick only the diagonal elements, right? 1, 4, 10, 12. So this is similar in nature. In the previous one, while working with this, you were able to pick elements, this 1, 2, etc., right? So similarly, you can pick any element in the row you want, even the table is large. So that's the thing. So algorithm wise, there is no difference between this and this and this, only that the index will change. So now you will be accessing. So 0th element you will keep. You will then keep for the second line, let's say first element, and sorry, the index 1 element, and the third line you will keep index 0, 1, 2, right? And for the fourth line 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. In the similar way which you had done in the previous thing. So again, it's in the same spirit, no problem. So once you get it, you can again convert them into integers, right? And you can add them. And then this gives you this. Is that clear? So the crucial thing is that if you understand this one, then the other things becomes easy, because all of them, in all of these questions, the only thing that you need to do how to access each element in the given table, which you do it here, and the rest of them just build on this. So if you're still confused, I suggest you to ask questions, and even if not clear, even after that, if you're not clear, then just download this and play around. I think you'll be able to get it. It's not a problem. So I don't know, maybe I'll wait for a minute or two if somebody wants to ask question. Okay. Okay, so yeah, maybe I'll go ahead. And again, in the third question, again, you had to work, you are asked to work on this table itself, right? And again, you have asked to access all the elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 2, etc. But only for those rows where AB is less than 25. So that just means that we need to avoid this row. So how do we do it? So for that, what we do, instead of focusing on each element one by one, we focus on this row with the values of AB, right? So we just access these elements, and we put a if command. Only if this AB is less than 25, we'll we'll copy this whole thing and write it to the text file. That has been done here. So that's the algorithm. We just want to know, right? So again, all these things that you see, again, it's like picking up one number at a time, right? So this AB is there. So I'm picking ABs from all the rows. And only if AB is less than 25, I'm just writing the whole row, because so each row is this, right? So this can be just copied and can be written in the other file. And when you do that, and when you write in this a new file, it will give you what you wanted. So, which is this. Okay. So similarly, you need to find average of all numbers. Again, this is the ultimate. Now you need to access all the elements that you want. No problem. And you just need to add everything up and the divide by number of points that you have. So that's what you do. So in this question, actually I have used a nested for. I'm not sure if this got a bit complicated for you. So again, till here everything is same. I'm accessing each row. So here now this element will correspond to, let's say, what they do. I'll just maybe comment this out and run this. Maybe this one as well. Right, so we run them, right? So till here I'm just picking all these things, 1, 2, 3, all these rows, right? Now what I'm doing, I'm like applying a nested for, right? So now I'm focusing on the first row, and in this first row I'm iterating over all these numbers. So I'm just going to 1, then I'm going to 2, then I'm going to 3, then I'm going to 2 again. Okay, so when this is done, then again the whole loop will go. It will go to the second line. So then I'll go to 3, 4, 7, 12. So this is done in this second for. Okay, so here what I'm just doing is that I'm picking the numbers, and it's easier to form a empty list and keep on appending this number, because then at once you can perform any calculation, for example, average, etc., on a list, if you can pick up and etc. Right. So that has been done. So when you pick this element, and now they are included here. So let me run the whole thing. Right. So all these elements are now have been appended into this empty list which I had defined, and this is that. Right. And so if you just want like sum, then it will just give you this. If you want to divide, if you find the average of all numbers, you just need to divide it by how the length of the list, for example, which I have not done, sorry. So this length number list. So this will give you the average 6.5625. Okay. So here we are done with the table files. So you can see that in order to play with table, you need to apply a lot of for loops. But again, if you have an astronomers, we use a lot of tables, yeah, because we have a number of quantities, and the number of sources also often are in very 10,000s, even in millions. So then it becomes very cumbersome to do things by this. So here you will understand the importance of AstroPy module, where you don't have to do anything. All the functions are very well defined. So you can just do all these things in one command using a single command. So this was just to give a flavor that, again, if you want to deal with large table with this, very basic core Python functionalities, then what all you have to do, and how your life becomes easy if you use a specialized module which is written for handling all these things. Okay, so now we are moving to this command line arguments, and again this is very simple. So this is that write a program which accepts two command line arguments and returns their sum. Okay, so maybe you can provide two numbers. So I have written a script, command sum.py, which I'm going to show you maybe. So let me, I'm not sure whether this is, I can maximize this or something. So, but maybe I'll read it. The only thing that you need to import is that this module, right? And then you can provide two arguments, A and B, right? Suppose they're in numbers, I like written this for a number, but you can also write it for string. No problem, right? So the total will be float of A plus float of B. And this where A and B will be given from command line, and this will return the sum, which was wanted. Okay, so now I do Python 3 command sum.py. Python 3 because I have both Python 2 and 3 installed. If you have only Python 3, then you can just write Python, no problem. So let's say we want to get sum of 1.2 space, let's say 3.4. What is it? Sum is 4.6. So that's how it works. It's very simple. Just to give a flavor of what are the command line arguments. Okay. Now the same thing, write again command line argument where you provide a temperature in Celsius and print the Fahrenheit equivalent of the same. Okay. So then again you can do temp. Wait. Star.py open temp.py. So actually what I have done, I think by mistake, I have inverted the problem. So here I'm asking to take the temperature in Fahrenheit, and it should return temperature in Celsius. But again, you can always define a function which does the opposite. So in the first part, I'm just defining a function which returns centigrade. if you give it a Fahrenheit. And so this function will take one argument, and that argument can be given by the command line. So for that we use this sys, import sys, the module, and using the sys we can give it to the command line, right? So for example, we just want to know what is it here. Python 3 that file, and here I'm just giving something Fahrenheit, I don't know, maybe 100, then what do you get some 37.7 degrees Celsius. That's what, very simple. And for the last question, we need to write a program which accepts this output table.txt. And this output table.txt was this table, remember? Okay. And it will take from command line and finds the average of all numbers in that table, right? So this we already have done, right? Here, here we have already written a kind of for loop, or maybe the algorithm is well defined. So in this question also we were like after the average, right? So we had summed and then we have divided it. So this thing is already there. The only thing that we need to do is that convert this into a function and save this as a script with an extension .py, right? And this function should take a file, a text file as input, and then it will provide you all the answers that you have. So this algorithm is written. We just convert it. So that I'll show you. So it's called command sum. No, not this. So it's called average. Average.py. So you see, I'm importing sys again. The table name should be given as the command line argument, and that thing will go inside here. So everything else remains the same. It's just that I have defined in in this whatever I need to do, so that algorithm remains here. So now I'll just put this and we need to run this with this as command line argument. Let's say, I don't know, output table.txt. So Python 3 average.py. What was that? Output table.txt. Output table.txt. So it gives you this average 6.56, which I think we had find it here as well, right? So it's working. So yeah, I think I have gone through all the solutions. So maybe I'll stop here and take the questions.
So we can ask if anybody had any trouble with any of the questions, or were you able to finish everything?
Yeah, I think this was pretty straightforward. Yeah, I do want that feedback if people were like comfortable solving all these questions with relative ease or not.
The questions were relatively easy, but I think the difficult part was that I was more used to the libraries, and so not using the libraries was a bit of a challenge. But yeah, it was nice.
Right. So you can also like provide your feedback if you want, either on chat or maybe not here on the Moodle. And we will release this notebook, no problem. And we'll release all the other codes as well. So I have written all the codes in very direct and kind of brute force way. There are different styles which one can adopt. I think there was in chat somebody suggested that you can use with or etc. So that of course you can do, no problem. That might be more elegant. Okay, so maybe I'll go to the chat and maybe start taking questions if nobody's asking you. That's fine. Fine. So the first question is, please explain the programming on calculation of trace again. Okay, again, let's go here. Let's go to the trace. Right. So I would just want to maybe go over this once more. Like, how do you get, how do you access all this? Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. If you are given a table like this. So what you are doing is that first you're taking all the lines, okay, and you are splitting them using this delimiter, and then the 0th element, of course, will be these numbers. So if you just want to print that, it will look something like this. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if you want to access, let's say, first element, what you need to do is that in this line, the 0th is the first and the index 1 is the second. Okay. Now, had this been some other long kind of line, or let's say like more rows and columns are there, you have to change these indices and you can always access them. So accessing them is not a problem. Okay. So if you understand this, the trace calculation becomes easy. So what you need to do is go on the first line, access only one. Okay. And for the second line, go only to the second line and we access only 2. Okay. So that's we do. So just going into that problem. So what you do, so till here, everything remains the same. Whatever I showed you here. Okay. And after that, what happens that I'm defining the elements which are diagonal. How do you do that? Now split them. Okay. So the first iteration is I equal to 0. So for 0th line, 0th element will be taken. Okay. And when it goes to the second loop, for the first line, index 1 will be taken. For the second line, index 2 will be taken, and like that. So you're accessing the diagonal elements. Okay. Now, what you're doing is, what then you do is that first you have to define a trace, which is 0, because there were no elements, so sum is 0, no problem. Okay. So what you do then is that you just keep on adding. So for the line 1, for the 0th line, you get this diagonal element and add it to this trace. Okay. Go to the second line, pick again diagonal element and add. And go to the third line, again pick the proper index for the diagonal element, add. And that way this keep on increasing. So actually you are iteratively adding. So at the end of the day, when you will complete the whole loop, you have picked every diagonal element and would have added. So that gives you trace. So that's how it is done. Okay, so trace is done. Solutions will be shared. Question 15, last part. Alternatively, could you use the mean or average methods instead of summing and dividing by the length of resultant list? No problem. You can always use it. It's easy. I think I've done very brute force method and using very limited things, but you can do it. Question 18, I think the same. A little suggestion. In the exercise of the palindrome, the code would become more robust if a string and reverse the upper and the lower method are called before comparing their equality. That way, the possibility of the first letter being capital would be taken care of. Yeah, no problem. If you can already use this upper and lower methods, you can do it. It's a good suggestion. Maybe, as an exercise, maybe everybody should try to incorporate this. Regarding the even and odd, there was this suggestion that you can define this function and then pass any list and with any method to print it, and so that way is a general way of doing programming. So you are making your program very general. So whatever list you supply with start and end, it will pick even and odd. Yeah, that can be done. What is there? Zoom. For checking prime numbers, we need to check divisibility only till square root of n by 1. Yes. Actually, if you are like going for very large number of values, then this algorithm might work. Like I have incorporated very elementary definition of prime and just going all the way because it's only from 0 to 100. But suppose you had to find prime all the way up to, I don't know, 10 million, then of course you won't do it like this. So then you can incorporate some other known things you want, that maybe you just need to check the divisibility only to square root of n plus 1. The question on the random integers, I think, have been answered. So that's done. There are more messages. The spider Python question has been answered. Can we have more sample questions like this to practice more? Remember, there are n number of books that you can get, and even the internet is very rich in if you want to just practice, there is a lot of questions at this level or even difficult, and you always have this solution which will be given as well. So you can keep on doing it. So as long as you are comfortable answering these questions, you can always go and maybe work on it. But if you have faced difficulty in solving this assignment itself, I suggest that you go through this solution once more and try to find, in what way you would like to tackle a question and come up with your own solution and maybe answer it. Okay, so there's one more suggestion, that there's a mathematical way to do equation 7 because there's a sequence falling here. One can use mathematical sigma summation as a function and compute accordingly in a list with million entry size. Yeah, see, look, you can do like all sorts of things, right? But the thing is that here, like, it's this assignment was intended for those people who just have started, just want to brush their very basics. Once you have this, you can play around, right? If you want to compute, million integers, if you want, or you want to get prime numbers from 1 to, let's say, 10 million, you can always come up with more ideas and incorporate into this kind of stuff and maybe make a very efficient code. But the idea was not that. It was just given to, this assignment was just given just to brush up whatever you have learned in the classes. Yeah, so Praveen is asking, can we produce 10 random integers without specifying range? Yeah, no problem. So range you need to specify, I think, in that function. I'm sure there might be some other kind of functions which, so the way random works is that it kind of creates a random distribution, right? So so for that, this limit is needed. If you want to generate 10 random integers without specifying range, I'm not sure like how you do that, but maybe there might be some existing solutions to this problem, but that's not known to me right now. Sikandar, okay. Do we have to submit this assignment? We don't have to submit this assignment, but like I strongly advise that you go through it and maybe try to solve it if you have not, because the second assignment will be much more difficult. And if you cannot do this, if you're having problem here, you might be in trouble. And there might be some difficulties during the second one. Okay, so are there any more questions?
Preetish, can you just go to the solution of first question?
Okay.
I think I have a small confusion. See, we are giving range from 1 to 100,
Yeah.
but later on you are changing it to 1 to 300, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we are getting a number beyond 100, right? So
Yeah.
100 into n.
Yeah.
Can you clarify? Okay, okay. Because in the solution we are getting 106, so here somewhere we are multiplying.
Yeah, I have changed, like, so you can take.
So I mean, we are increasing the range to 300, right?
Yeah, because suppose you are taking from 1 to 100 and maybe, yeah, like,
No.
yeah, just increasing the range because I
Yes,
just
yes,
wanted to
that's
get some other numbers. That's it.
very nice.
There's no logic.
Right, right. Thanks, thanks.
Understood.
So, okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for attending this. I hope you keep on practicing and come up with interesting suggestions, even improve the codes and, have fun learning Python.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't emphasize that enough. So please practice.
Yeah.
Okay. First step is to you read other people's codes, but it's also writing your own and also improving other people's codes.